Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jan Szrewiński. After approximately 2 weeks in orbit, the crew of the Axiom-4 mission, including Polish astronaut Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, is leaving the International Space Station. According to the European Space Agency, the return journey has now begun. This will be followed by the Dragon's capsule undocking procedure at about 1:05 p.m. if weather and technical conditions permit. The mission began on the 25th of June, when a historic spaceflight with Polish astronaut Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski was launched. The Dragon capsule docked at the International Space Station 1 day later. Over the course of the mission, Uznański-Wiśniewski conducted a total of 13 scientific experiments. He is the second Pole in history to travel to space. Now back to Earth and back to politics. Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Kellogg, has arrived in Kyiv to discuss Ukraine's security and sanctions against Russia. Upon arrival at the train station, the US special envoy was greeted by the head of the Ukrainian Presidential Administration, Andriy Yermak. Yermak wrote on social media that Ukrainian officials and Kellogg will discuss Kyiv's defense matters, weapon deliveries, as well as ways of strengthening the cooperation between the United States and Ukraine. At the same time, the head of Volodymyr Zelensky's administration noted that Russia does not want a ceasefire and said that Kyiv fully supports Donald Trump's principle of peace through strength. The most important point of Kellogg's week-long visit will be talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukrainian officials are expected to brief Kellogg on the current situation on the front lines and appeal for increased pressure on Russia.
I am grateful to everyone who is truly steadfast in defending our state, our independence, and our people. Today we also discussed the upcoming visit of General Kellogg. Negotiations on further support will take place during the week. I instructed Commander-in-Chief Syrski and Chief of the General Staff Natov to present the information we have on Russia's capabilities and our prospects. We are also preparing meetings between President Trump's special envoy and the heads of the security service of Ukraine and our intelligence services. The information provided will be comprehensive. We count on the United States fully understanding what can be done to compel Russia to peace.
US President Donald Trump said he will send Patriots to Ukraine. While he did not specify if he means the entire air defense systems or just the missiles, Trump said Washington would be reimbursed for their costs by America's European partners.
I haven't agreed on the number yet, but they're going to have some because they do need protection. But the European Union is paying for it. We're not paying anything for it, but we will send it. It'll be business for us, and we will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. But there's a little bit of a problem there. I don't like it.
Weapons are a priority for Ukraine. This is what Ukrainian MP Maria Ionova told TVP World in a recent interview when asked about Kyiv's expectations from US President Donald Trump's Monday announcement. She also stressed that sanctions should not only be directed at Russia, but also at its partners in its war effort.
Our first priority is weaponry, because we have to strengthen our Ukrainian armed forces, who are really exhausted, because we see how many attacks and how many human resources and new types technological weapon Russians have. And that is why the sanction policy should be directed not only to Russian Federation, but also to their partners in the war, and a lot of also spare parts from different allies of Russian Federation.
During a phone call between US President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin, which took place on the 3rd of July, Putin reportedly said that he has plans to intensify the offensive in eastern Ukraine over the coming 2 months. According to a report by Axios, Trump then told French President Emmanuel Macron that Putin wants to take all of Ukraine.
Citing unnamed sources familiar with the call between Putin and Trump, Axios reported that Putin told the US president he will escalate military operations in Ukraine. During their July 3rd conversation, he reportedly said that Moscow intended to continue its offensive operations until it secured the full administrative borders of the occupied regions of Ukraine. The news comes amid intensified Russian assaults in the Donetsk region and attempts to breach into the neighboring Dnipropetrovsk region. Currently, the Russian army occupies around 20% of Ukraine's territory, including most of the Luhansk region, 2/3 of the Donetsk region, and minor parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson regions.
Finance ministers are meeting in Brussels on Monday to nail down a response to US President Donald Trump's eye-watering 30% tariff threat. The proposal was announced over the weekend, sending European ambassadors into a diplomatic frenzy. We are now joined live by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins in the Belgian capital. Angela, so how is the bloc trying to react? Do we actually have anything new regarding what this response might actually entail?
Yes, so ministers from across the 27 EU member states have met in Brussels to figure out their response to this latest threat spearheaded by US President Donald Trump on Saturday, stating he would slap 30% import levies on certain European goods if a deal is not brokered between Brussels and Washington. Now, we heard from those ministers this morning as they convened to talk about what their response could be, and one of the most striking comments that we heard was from the Danish Foreign Affairs Minister, that is Lars Rasmussen. He said that to prepare for peace, we must prepare for war, and that's exactly what this trade kerfuffle is starting to resemble, a full-blown trade war. We also heard from the EU's Trade Commissioner, Maroš Šefčovič. He spoke to reporters right before those 27 ministers met for those back-to-back dialogues. Let's take a listen to what that commissioner had to say. It's also important to note that he is the EU emissary responsible for speaking with his counterparts in Washington. But let's take a listen to what he had to say this morning.
We are showing this enormous patience, enormous creativity to find the solutions. But if it stays 30 plus, simply the trading as we know it will not continue with a huge negative effect on the both sides of the Atlantic. And therefore, I think we have to do, and I will definitely do everything I can to prevent this super negative scenario.
Yes, so he sounded quite shocked speaking to reporters this morning. What we have heard from the Berlaymont, that is the European Commission building, is that there have been fruitful discussions, particularly between European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump. We know they spoke on the phone at least 2 weekends ago. It was a good conversation centred on trade. But in the wake of this shocking announcement from that US President, we heard European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stating that the Commission is going to pursue a two-prong approach. The first is keeping dialogue open between Washington and Brussels, but the second being preparing potential retaliatory measures. We know that these measures were initially put on ice. They were again prolonged yesterday, expected to kick in August if those 30% import levies are introduced from Washington. But there's going to be a press conference at 2:30 in the Belgian capital today, where we're hoping to get an update from that commissioner himself, as well as those representative from the 27 EU member states.
Angela Skujins there with the latest update on this situation. Angela, thank you very much for joining us. Now moving on to our next story. In an interview for TVP World, Ignacy Morawski, chief economist at the Puls Biznesu newspaper, discussed the EU's potential response to the ongoing trade tensions with the United States, particularly regarding President Trump's tariffs. Morawski suggested that the European Union might initially take a diplomatic approach, hoping to secure concessions from Trump.
I suppose that the answer from the European Union will be to wait and negotiate. The first words from major European politicians indicate that the response at first will be calm. So everyone expects that Donald Trump will back down, at least to some extent. So he will withdraw from the most serious tariffs. If not, we will see. If not, then certainly there will be a trade conflict. And the answer will be very difficult because Europe exports much more to the US than it buys from United States. So EU is more exposed to the effects of trade war.
A new survey suggests nearly as many Hungarians see Ukraine as a threat as they do Russia. The poll reported by the daily Nepsava shows 33% of respondents viewing Russia as Hungary's main threat, while 27% say the same thing about Ukraine. The numbers, however, tell a deeper story. Among supporters of Prime Minister Viktor Orban's ruling Fidesz party, only 11% see Russia as the top threat. In contrast, 45% of them believe Ukraine poses the greatest danger. Opposition voters see things very differently. Over half of them name Russia as the main threat, and only 14% point to Ukraine. The divide reflects the impact of Orban's long-running anti-Ukrainian messaging. During a recent non-binding referendum, 95% of participants opposed Ukraine's EU membership, though fewer than 2.5 million people took part in the vote. Monday marks Bastille Day, France's most important national holiday, celebrated with a traditional military parade in Paris and evening fireworks displays across the country. Bastille Day commemorations of storming the Bastille on July the 14th, 1789, were taking place today. And this was a pivotal moment that ignited the French Revolution and led to the overthrow of the monarchy. In an address to the military on Sunday, French President Emmanuel Macron announced an additional 6.5 billion euros military spending over the next 2 years, saying freedom in Europe faces a greater threat than at any time since the end of World War II. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.